put down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey, gang. How's everybody doing? That's me. Happy Wednesday evening. I am glad to have all of you here. I really appreciate you taking another Wednesday evening and spending it with me here for TogChat. So listen, I hope everybody's been shooting this week. We're finally getting some really good weather. The weather's getting warm, at least here in the Northeast it is. We got a lot of people here tonight. We've got some people that haven't been here in a while. Jeremy's here. Linda's here. Let's see. I saw Carl. Kevin's here. John Edwards here. Mark's here. I know Sven's here. James. Listen, gang, seriously, as always, appreciate it. Big time. Xavier's here for a while. And Xavier, listen, I know you're being really helpful to people, but do me a favor. They came to ask me the questions. So how about if you let me give the advice and you follow along? I'd appreciate that. Seriously, okay? So listen, gang, one piece of business tonight, just one. And then we're like digging in. I told you guys last week about a contest that I am judging. Not sure how I got roped into this. I'm not going to lie, but I said yes. So here we are. It's a contest at the photo website called photocrowd.com. It's free to enter, which is really cool. You can sign up. You do have to set up a profile. You upload your pictures. Interfit, the folks that sponsor me, the Honey Badger folks, okay? They are giving away two lucky winners are going to get the Interfit Honey Badger 2 light kits. So those are the ones where you get the lights, the 7-inch reflectors, the pop-up soft boxes, and stands and a carrying case. So really cool. So you've got 1 day and a little less than 14 hours left to be able to enter. And then the winners will be announced, I believe, on June 8th. I will tell you already, there's like over 2,600 entries in the contest. It's like insane. So I was spending a lot of time today going through a lot of the pictures that are in there. There's some really good stuff. And hey, there's some really not so good stuff, right? But the point is, it's still an open contest, still a chance to win. So I hope you guys will take advantage of that opportunity because we're talking honey badgers, right? So, it's a good deal. So the link for that, just so that you guys have it, remember the deadline is June 1st. So it's coming up like right around the corner. There's the link. It's in the chat window. So go ahead and sign up, enter your photos, and you are good to go. So listen, we've got a lot of questions already tonight. I just want to give you guys a real quick heads up. You may have seen if you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and hey, come on, if you don't follow me on Facebook and Twitter, what the heck? Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, all right? There's a picture that I just uploaded last night. It's been getting a lot of attention. I'm really glad. I like that people like the picture. You want to make sure that you follow me on Instagram. Tomorrow, I'm going to upload on Instagram a short video clip. So it's not a full YouTube video, but it's a short video clip that'll show you the behind the scenes. It even shows you a little bit of the Photoshop. It's not a tutorial. It's like a quick run through of how I created that background and what I did and kind of the whole process behind the shot. So if you're curious about how it was done, sign up or make sure you follow me on Instagram and you'll be able to see that's going to go live tomorrow morning. The picture went up today. Kevin, had I known that there were going to be more than 2,600 entries and I have to review all of them, I actually have to comment on a bunch of them, like do little reviews and all that kind of stuff. I may have thought twice about actually judging the contest, but I'm going to tell you, it's actually been kind of fun in a torturous kind of way. It's one of those things where you guys look at pictures, right? The bad stuff, it's bad. The good stuff's really cool. So it's kind of neat to see them. So Deck Luck, if it's not on YouTube, you don't see it. Well, that's a bummer, man. If you're a photographer, dude, you gotta get with the whole Instagram thing. Like it's the place to be. In fact, some of you guys may not know this, but Instagram, the guy that made like the $1 billion from Facebook because he sold Instagram, he's a photographer. Instagram was actually built originally for photographers to be able to share their photography with other photographers. So anyway, let's get into some questions, all right? Because I got a lot. So start loading your stuff in there, gang. And by the way, if you haven't checked in, said hi, tell me where you're from, I love that. Please do. I know we got a lot of people here from the UK tonight. God, somebody from China. Michael, you're here all the way from China? Awesome. Susan's here from Down Under. Gang, this is the coolest part of doing this. I'm sorry, I don't mean to geek out, but it just is. Like getting to talk to people from all over the world. You guys are absolutely awesome. So some of the early questions, and then I'll catch up with the stuff here in the chat, okay? And hey, don't forget, if you got a question that you have to get answered, like you really need the answer, you know that I'm not going to be off of here in 60 minutes. I always stay late, but super chat, click on that little dollar sign down in the bottom left-hand corner for as little as $1, or if you're really crazy, $500. You can go ahead and you can make sure that I answer your question, all right? So let's get to this first question here. Jean-Edward had a question, and it is, in principle, what is the difference between a deep parabolic softbox and an octagon softbox? If they're both the same size and they're both located at the same distance of the subject, how would you differentiate the two? And in your opinion, is there advantage of one over the other when doing portraiture? So the obvious difference is one's a parabolic shape and the other one's an octagon shape. And I know that's kind of the smart aleck answer, right? Jean-Edward, honestly, at the end of the day, there's not a big difference. So let's talk about the obvious differences. So first of all, the parabolic shape, they are generally round, but not always. So depending on the shape of the front of the modifier, the one big difference that you're going to have is you're going to have a different shape catch light in your subject's eyes. Now, if you're doing a 3/4 length or a full length picture, nobody's going to notice that catch light. Not a big deal, right? And you're not going to be able to tell the difference. But if you're doing like a really tight close-up, like one of my beauty shots, then you are going to see a difference in the catch light. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this before. You know, like when I use those fluorescent strip lights, you get the vertical strips. Let's be clear. The only people that ever complain about catch lights, I swear to you, in my 42 years of photography, I have never had an exception to this. The only people that complain about catch lights are people like you guys, people with cameras. I've never had a subject look at their eyes and say, what are those weird lines, right? So, I mean, but some people, hey, they like a certain kind of catch light, period. So a lot of people will use beauty dishes, and they stick with beauty dishes strictly for the sake of the fact that it gives you a round catch light, kind of like the sun. So that's up to you. But so one of the obvious things is going to be a difference in the catch light, especially on the close-up stuff. The one piece of the equation that you left out of your question, Jean-Edward, so this is also a factor, is the depth. So some soft boxes are very shallow. They're not very deep. Most parabolic modifiers are meant to be deep. That's part of where you get the shape. It's that parabola, right? So a parabolic reflector is going to tend to not spread light as rapidly. All light spreads. We got that, I hope, right? That's the inverse square law. But a shallow softbox will have a tendency to throw light out at a broader angle faster. So if you're trying to control your light a little bit more, depending on your circumstances and the distance that you're going to set up from your subject, the parabolic reflector might give you a little bit more control. But you're also going to find, Jean-Edward, that generally speaking, now it depends on the brand, okay? But generally speaking, you're going to spend a lot more for a parabolic type reflector than you will for a regular soft box. So that was a really long, really detailed answer, and I did not tell you what you wanted me to tell you. You wanted me to tell you, get this, it's better. At the end of the day, it's a matter of preference. I will tell you this, if you look at photographers that have lots of lighting gear and do lots of stuff with beauty dishes or modifiers or soft boxes or whatever, you're going to find that they all kind of tend to have their favorites, but every now and then they do mix it up. So for me, I'll tell you what my practice is with that. So in fact, if you guys have been following really closely the stuff that I've posted very recently, I've started to mix a beauty dish back in. You haven't seen a beauty dish in one of my videos for a long time. I had just kind of gotten away from beauty dishes. And in all honesty, the reason for that is when I switched over to the Interfit Honey Badgers, I had just purchased a buff beauty dish, Pulsey Buff, right? For the DigiBees. You guys have been following along with that. Well, the Pulsey Buff, and I know I'm going to upset some Pulsey Buff fans, but hey, I'm sorry, I'm calling it like I see it. I used to own a Pulsey Buff beauty dish years ago, probably 10 years ago, and I loved it. It had 4 posts that came up and held the center deflector. The new Pulsey Buff beauty dish has 1 post that comes up and holds the center deflector. So you have to assemble it and deassemble it because that post doesn't screw into the beauty dish. It goes through the umbrella holder in the Digit Bee or the Alien Bee. And I'm sorry, but that is dumb design. You can quote me on that. So all you buff users, I'm really, really sorry, but it's just dumb design. That's not the way that the man Paul C. Buff designed a beauty dish. That's come along after he was gone. So I had kind of just gotten frustrated with it, and I never took. It's literally hanging in a bag on my studio wall. Never bothered with it. So recently, the folks at Interfit were kind enough to send me 2 of their beauty dishes. They're beauty dishes designed the way beauty dishes should work. They're just super simple. They're Bowens mounts, snap on, 4 posts that hold the center deflector, and they're great. So I'm using the beauty dishes right now a lot more, but frequently what I will do is I'll just simply realize like, hey, I'm kind of in a rut. Like I've been using this modifier. Like you kind of get in this groove where that one modifier is like your go-to modifier for a long time. And you realize, hey, one of the best ways to kind of switch things up, go pick a different modifier intentionally and work around that modifier. Use that modifier for a shoot because it's going to tweak your lighting a little bit. But remember again, just like I've shown you guys, remember the video that I did where I took the shoot through umbrella and create a beauty dish light with it? Don't get so hung up in the thought process that the modifier is the solution to making your photography better. It's not, okay? You get a modifier when you actually have a legit need or demand for the modifier. Otherwise, come on, you're just wasting money. And there are better things that honestly you could spend your money on than getting a bunch of cool modifiers. So I hope that helps, Sean Edward. Okay. Another question here I had from Xavier. Is it true that focal, and this one, man, I had to think about this one for a while when I read it, because when I went through it the first time, I was like, huh? So is it true that the focal length has no impact on depth of field if you keep, and this is for like shooting a portrait, right? So is it true that the focal length of the lens has no impact on depth of field if you keep the face and the shoulder size the same in every frame at every focal length? So that means essentially you're going to zoom with your feet, right? So that your composition and your subject size in the shot is exactly the same from frame to frame as you're using different focal length lenses. So here's my answer, Xavier. From a completely factual standpoint, I have no freaking idea, okay? My honest gut response is, that's got to be a wrong statement. It's simply got to be a wrong statement. But here's the more important piece, okay? The more important piece is, why do we care? Like, I'm not sure what the value is to that. So I guess my question back to you, Xavier, is give me a little bit more context around this question. Like, honestly, what it sounds to me, and if this is the case, fine, just tell me. But it sounds to me like some YouTuber spouted this off, and you're like kind of checking the source. In which case, I have no idea. So I don't. One thing I don't want to do is I don't want to mislead you guys. But I can tell you this: my from a practical standpoint, and using that information, honestly, it's kind of like, who cares? I don't really see the value of that piece of information. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm kind of curious now. But I would not trust some source on YouTube. I would actually want to go try it. So it's something that you could actually try, like physically try, really fairly simple. But I'd like to know more about kind of what context you're trying to figure that out. Okay. So Dan had a question here, and this is one that's kind of near and dear to me because you know that I am really, really a big one about our youth and learning photography. So let's see. He's had a camera in his hand for well over 1,000. Oh, okay. Sorry. He was apologizing first because he hasn't been here for a while, but he was justifying that he's done at least 100 hours of shooting in the last 6 weeks. So yes, Dan, you are allowed to watch TogChat tonight. Okay. So he had to take his 5-year-old son with him to a charity golf outing that he was shooting. So he put his old D7000 with a 50 millimeter f1.8 in the kid's hands and told him to look through it and press the button. So he was surprised and happy that his son decided to zoom with his feet and even wound up with some shots that naturally were using the rule of thirds. So in other words, guys, in short, this is proud Papa thinking that he's got a budding photographer in the family, right? So Dan's question is, how can I encourage him but not screw up his natural instincts at the same time? So we're talking about a 5-year-old, right? So I am by no means an expert on child psychology or any of that stuff. But my honest advice to you is, Dan, you encourage him by don't try to teach him. At 5 years old, he's not even really in school yet beyond kindergarten or maybe daycare, right? So think about how intense, or really not intense, are the educational programs that he's having for math and English and that kind of stuff. They're not really that intense. So I would not try to turn photography into too much of a lesson. Come on, let's face it. It's your 5-year-old son. So the biggest piece of fun that he's having is not with a camera, Dan. He's tagging along with dad, and he's getting to do stuff that dad's doing. So, man, that's how you encourage him. Let him tag along more. Or, for that matter, create opportunities for the two of you to go out and shoot stuff and do stuff. And do not critique his pictures at all. Don't teach him about rules. They're 4-letter words. I know you're going to teach your son not to use 4-letter words. So don't teach him 4-letter words. Just let him have fun. And if he's still plugging away with that camera in another, 5 to 7 years, then start to ease into the rules and that. But deal with the rules of physics first. Try to leave the creativity busting rules out of the equation. But honestly, for 5 years old, number one, very cool. But number two, as long as he's having fun, man, just keep creating the fun for him. Don't take the fun out of it. Okay? Just take him along, let him spend time with dad doing the same thing that dad's doing. Because for a 5-year-old, that's like the coolest thing in the world. So that would be my advice. Okay? Xavier had another question about the eye detection on the EM1 Mark II. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the Olympus that I use, the EM1 Mark II, their flagship camera, has amazing eye detection. You can set it for eye detection, and you can set it for left eye or right eye detection. So, which is like pretty amazing that the camera is able to distinguish between left eye, right eye, and do it on the fly. And I will tell you for a fact, it is wicked fast. So his question is, a friend of his is struggling with portraits and was amazed by the eye detection in the Sony a6300. He suggested that she rents one and then also an EM1 Mark II to compare it. So Sony's eye detection is good. Olympus's is a ton better. And no, I'm not getting paid to say that. Check out all the stats on the bench tests and that kind of stuff. The Olympus eye detection is it is truly amazing. When I first rented the EM1 Mark II, which you guys know I rented it long before I considered buying it, I went to visit my grandson, 3-year-old grandson, my son and daughter-in-law's kitchen. It's this nice big kitchen with an island in the middle that you can kind of go around it. And it's not a particularly well-lit kitchen. So it's one of those kitchens where on a sunny day, it's really bright. On a cloudy, overcast day, not so bright. The day that I rented this camera, I went down and, we visited with them. I had this camera out at arm's length with the viewfinder flipped out so that I could see the LCD. I had the eye tracking turned on, low light conditions, and basically I was running around the kitchen with my grandson chasing me. And I was like making a game out of, can you catch the camera? So he's like running like a monster trying to chase it, and I'm just firing away the whole time. This thing hit on every frame. I mean, every frame. The only time it missed was one frame where his hand was like this and it caught the fingers because it couldn't see the eyes. That was it. So, but I've heard a lot of great things about Sony. I mean, I'm not trying to diss Sony, gang, but everything I've read, definitely the Olympus surpasses the Sony. Adam's just reminding me, which is very true. The eye detection on Olympus in general, it's not just about the EM1 Mark II. The lower models in the Olympus line have that same feature, and it's like really, really sweet. So, but Xavier, you did give her the right advice. Rent them. If she's in a country, now I realize for some of you, depending on where you're at in the world, you can't rent cameras conveniently or reasonably priced. And I'm sorry, that is unfortunate. But if you have the ability to rent, yes, when you look at the cost of a camera, and then when you look at the cost of what it's going to, cost you to rent, you definitely want to go rent first. Okay. One of the smart moves is sign up for like the newsletter at like lensrentals.com, and they routinely run specials on the rentals, so you can get the rentals even cheaper yet. Save yourself some money, right? Okay. All right. Alex had a question here. What lens would you recommend for portrait photography for Nikon users? He currently has a 50mm f1.8. He's on a budget, no more than maybe $200, or would I recommend that he spends more? I also know Alex is using an APS-C sensor, so he's working with a smaller sensor. So Alex is tough, and I also happen to know Alex is 17 years old, so we're talking about a teenager here. He doesn't have an unlimited budget to work with, right? Alex, my advice would be to do one of two things. Option one, buy a used lens. $200, unfortunately, this is kind of the sucky part about photography. And Alex, I know you're in the UK. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's expensive. So $200 is very, very limiting in terms of what you're going to be able to get. Now, for $200, if you are patient and you do your looking and do it well, you should be able to find a good short to medium length telephoto lens that's used in that range. And I'll come back to what focal lengths will be best in a second. Otherwise, you need to kind of be patient and save your pennies and get to the point where you can buy a new lens. So the challenge that you have here, Alex, is since you're using an APS-C camera and you're fairly new in the learning curve of photography, and you're going to probably and hopefully continue to grow and do more and get better and want bigger and better things, you have to make a decision before you buy anything. Are you going to buy your stuff just for APS-C cameras? Or are you going to look ahead with the idea that maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, you're going to want to move up to full frame cameras? And if that's the case, if that's where your thinking is, well, then it would be nice if the lenses, whatever lenses you buy now, if they will transfer and work with the full frame bodies. Do keep in mind that 4 or 5 years from now, Nikon's going to have a whole new lens system. We're already seeing hints of that because of the mirrorless cameras. But at least based on the current existing models of DSLRs, that's one of your considerations. So, Alex, there's a video on my website about not on my website, on my YouTube channel. In fact, let me bring it up to show you guys here. So I'll show you how you can find this, and then I'll also paste the link in. So let me just switch the screen over here. When you go to my YouTube channel, all you got to do is where the little magnifying glass is, type in portrait lens and hit enter, okay? And what's going to come up right there? Best lenses for portraits. I would encourage you watch this video. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste the link into the chat window. In that video, I talk about a lens made by a company called Tokina. It's a 100mm f2.8 macro lens. When I was shooting Nikon, it was hands down my favorite portrait lens and the sharpest portrait lens I've ever worked with in full frame DSLRs. So now if you were to use that on your APS-C camera, that's going to be the equivalent of about a 150mm lens, which is good for portraits, but it's actually a little bit long. In other words, it's going to put you at a bit of a distance from your subject, which it's more of a distance than I like to be at when I'm shooting portraits. For full frame, when you step up, it's awesome. So my recommendation, you'll see when you watch the video, I would recommend that you look at anything pretty much from like an 85 to maybe a 135 maximum range, but I would avoid the 135 unless you're planning to go to full frame soon. And I would be looking at like the 85 or the 100 as long as you are staying in the APS-C realm. But check out that video. It'll give you a lot of good information about how you should be going about, figuring out which lens to get and what's going to be best for you. Okay? All right. James, since we're talking about buying used gear, his question was, if you're buying used gear, who do you trust versus who should you avoid? And he gives examples like Craigslist, eBay, B&H, etc. So, it is like the wild, wild west when it comes to gear, and especially if you're looking at eBay. And I'll tell you, even as a seller, I have had some nightmarish, events happen to me on eBay trying to sell stuff. So the first thing is, understand a couple of things before I say who should you use, because I'm probably not going to answer that directly. But I want to give you some background. Understand that if you buy used gear from like B&H or Adorama, etc., you're going to pay more traditionally. However, you're also getting their backing, meaning you're going to some companies offer like a small warranty, or they have a return policy where you can try it out, return it if you don't like it, that kind of stuff. So there can be a lot of benefit to that, right? because of their reputation, they're going to check out that gear. If they say it's in great shape, it's going to be in great shape 99.9% of the time. If they have a return policy, you can return it, etc. Most stuff that you buy on eBay, especially used photography gear, there's not going to be a return allowed. So always check your eBay listings if they allow returns, because there's no return, you're stuck with it. And if it turns out it comes through and it's not as advertised, well then yes, you've got the PayPal buyer protection and that kind of stuff. But man, it is a pain in the butt to go through all those steps. So, Craigslist routinely gets a bad reputation for stuff. But if you think about it, for buying used gear, if you're looking locally in your area and you're going to go meet the person so that you can touch it and feel it and look it over before you hand over the cash, Craigslist is not a bad idea. And I will tell you that more recently, I see more and more and more photographers, and I've even done it, selling their used gear on Facebook. And again, you've got two choices. Understand that if you do it through the mail, you're taking on all kinds of risks. But if you are advertising through Facebook locally, and Facebook allows you to do the buy-sell stuff locally, so you can just target people in your area, and it doesn't have to be people that you're already friends with or people that you're already following. It can be people in your area who have an interest in cameras. So, you can post your stuff on Facebook. Facebook isn't taking any money. They're basically just allowing you to advertise the stuff. And then, it gives you the ability to say to the person, look, I want to come meet you. So that's really the thing that I would say to you is, if you're going to buy online used, I would actually encourage, even though I sold a lot of gear on eBay and I'm glad people bought it, I would actually encourage you to consider B&H or Adorama, but understand you're paying a markup. If you are willing to deal with people, locally, then I would say by all means, just make sure that you can touch it and handle it and see it beforehand. So it really kind of depends on what you're looking for and what your comfort level is. Because obviously when you do that local purchase, you don't have any of the buyer protection stuff from PayPal. That, none of that's involved. So, there's a balancing act there. It's all a matter of, what you're comfortable with, but whatever you do your due diligence. And even on eBay, I will say that, because I've sold more than I've bought on eBay. The smartest buyers that I've dealt with will come back on my auction with really, really good, intelligent, detailed questions about the piece in terms of how it's been used, how much use it has, all that kind of stuff. In other words, they're really doing their due diligence as best they can. They're not just reading my listing and saying, oh, okay, cool, and, bidding on it. They're coming back with really, really good questions, the kind of questions that you would be able to answer if you could hold the stuff in your hands and look at it. So, and they've clearly done their research in terms of exactly, exactly what this lens is all about and what should be included in it, all that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's get some of the questions out of the chat here. So, Deck Luck, the Tokina 1.28 is a great lens, however, it doesn't have VR. If you have to hand hold it, it might be a challenge. Deck, come on, seriously, man, it's a 100mm lens. Now, look, I know I'm going to step on somebody's toes here. If you have a disability, yeah, hand holding a 100mm lens is tough. But I'm sorry, man. Here's the thing: if you can't hand hold a 100mm lens because that lens and that camera you're using is too heavy, the first word that comes to mind for me, Olympus. Get a small camera. Get a small camera that has better features. But come on, hand holding a 100mm lens, that's not a big deal. I mean, certainly somebody with a disability, totally. I get that. So I'm not trying to be a jerk towards anyone there, but 100mm, we're not talking about heavy duty lenses here. Okay. Plus we're talking about portraits. So you shouldn't be using that 100mm lens by candlelight, right? Remember, photo requires light. So you guys heard me say before, I don't understand all you people that want to be able to take pictures with no light. That's counterintuitive to what we're doing. Photography is all about light. So, okay. Let's see. Adam had good success using the factory refurbished from Olympus, which, yeah, they do. They, if you sign up for their email newsletter, they routinely will post updates to refurbished stuff they have out there. And, most big companies that do refurbished stuff, they're not going to put junk out there, for refurbished because it usually comes with some kind of a warranty to it. So, yeah, that's definitely a way to go. So, Steve Trotter, there was a YouTube video about lens compression about a week ago. I think that is what he was asking about. Does it exist or not? Was the click drawn? Yeah, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. So I think I vaguely saw that video go by at some point, Steve. I'm not going to lie to you. I have gotten to the point, but hey, look, I've always been honest with you guys. I've gotten to the point that I pay very little attention to the blogs. Okay. I do keep an eye on DIYphotography.net. I feel that out of the three of them, they have maintained the most integrity. The problem that I'm struggling with the blogs, and the worst part of it is so just so you guys know that I'm being straight and there's no drama, no BS. What I'm about to say is honest feedback. And the problem with it is I'm going to be teaching on the same docket as the man who runs this next website in a moment later this month. So I'm going to have to face him after I say this. Okay. F-Stoppers is a site that I've lost a lot of faith in. And the reason being, if you go look at the articles on F-Stoppers lately, they're turning into the psychology website for the anxiety-driven photographers. And they're just feeding anxiety. You know, it's every other article is how do you overcome this mental issue? How do you overcome that mental issue? How do you feel better about what you're doing with your camera? I'm sorry, you know, maybe I'm just old and not relevant anymore, but that stuff is not helping anybody because really all it's doing is it's teaching people excuses. You know, what these people need is they need to pick up the damn camera and go take pictures and stop watching YouTube videos and stop reading blog articles. They need to simply go use the camera. So, you know, DIYphotography.net, they run some of those articles too. And I'm not a fan of them. But across the board, they're running a lot more good news. And so, yeah, I just don't keep up with a lot of those articles anymore because a lot of it sometimes too, honestly, is that people are just getting down in the weeds. Okay. So, you know, Deck, you're not going to get me to so Deck's here about it. After the Tokino 100's a macro lens, you might have a challenge with it without the VR when doing macro photography. Deck, here's a question for you, man. How the hell did we do macro photography back in the dark ages? You know, the 1990s. How is it we have macro images from then? Oh my God, think about the 1980s. What was that? That was like 20-some years ago, 30 years ago? How did those people possibly take macro images? And oh my God, just to think, like, I actually did macro images in the 1970s. How incredible is that? Because there was no VR, man. Like, how did people do it? VR is a convenience feature. Learn how to hold a camera and use a damn tripod. And why do you need to spend the money for VR? Like, what's the big deal? Back in the 1970s, you know how we did macro photography? Because I couldn't afford, I was a teenager. I couldn't afford macro lenses. I took a 50 millimeter lens, took it off the camera, flipped it around, and held it. And then with one finger, had to hold the shutter lever so that I could stop the shutter down. Like, and I handheld it, man. And I got sharp pictures. No camera motion, no VR. So the VR, if you need it, that's cool. Obviously, you don't like the Tokino 100. But man, I hate to tell you what, it's a damn beautiful lens. Okay, so I'm not going to debate you over it. It's a great lens. I recommend it to anybody. I stand by it. Go read the comments on the video that I did. You're going to find tons of people that bought that lens and love it. Absolutely love it. Joe Mack, yeah, man, it's awesome that when you flip a lens around. Now they have a cool name for it. They call it free lensing, but that's when, of course, you're tweaking the lens. So DK, sorry, the mic isn't peaking. That's Joe starting a rant. So you can blame it on Deck. It's okay. I love Deck. He's here all the time. But yeah, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that 100 2.8. It's a sweet lens. Okay. So JR, F-Stopper has too many no-name people that write articles. Yeah, you know, I mean, seriously, I don't want to make it a bashing thing about the blogs. Look, you know, all three of the blogs, Petapixel, and there's more than three, but the three big ones, right? F-Stoppers, Petapixel, DIYphotography.net. These guys they're great people. They bust their butts. They do an incredible service for the community. So I want to be really clear. I'm not looking to trash the blogs, but I promise you, like when I have a conversation with the guys from F-Stoppers, that's going to be my feedback. You know, I used to really enjoy their website. And now I honestly, sincerely feel that all they're doing is they're feeding people's anxieties. And I don't feel that they are doing a service to the photo community. If they would get back to actually teaching photography, then, you know, I think that there would be a much bigger benefit to that. But indeed, part of the problem is there's a lot of people that are teaching photography now. And so I think what's happening is that just like on YouTube, a lot of these people are kind of looking for another place to kind of find a space so that they can potentially own that space. And I can't speak for f-stoppers. I don't know if that's what they're doing, but that's what it feels like some people are doing. So, they're becoming kind of the feel-good photography website. So, hey, if that works for some people, that's great. But so, all right. So Troy Hall, am I wrong in using fast speeds to compensate for my shake? And freelancing is a blast. Freelancing is a blast. You're not wrong for using fast speeds to compensate for your shake. All good photography is problem solving. It simply is. Tripods help, obviously, but it's always going to depend on the situation. That's why I said there's no one solution for everything, in that sense. Okay. Deck, relax, man. I love you. I know that you originally said that, but your follow-up comments about the VR and that, my classroom, I'm just making sure people hear my message, man. Okay, that's why they're here, right? So my message is no, VR is not the solution. It's just not, okay? So it's cool. Like I said a few moments ago, you and I can agree to disagree. I still love you. You're awesome. So don't worry, okay? All right, let me scroll back here because I know I missed a bunch of stuff here. Paul Bellatier, have you gotten any artifacts shooting any low light with your mirrorless camera? Is that an autocorrect? Because that's kind of a cool. Just call it mirrorless right now. It's like a whole. It's we save a syllable that way. I like that. Okay. It seems to show up at concerts as straight bars across the photo. I wonder if that's something that can be solved. So I finally actually got to use the cameras in ridiculously low light about 2 weeks ago when I was down in Fort Worth, Texas. I got to go to the famous Billy Bob's for the rodeo. Coolest thing ever because I've never been to a rodeo, but we're talking like no light. This was like probably one of the worst lighting situations I have ever been in my entire life to take pictures. It was bad. So, and it's one of the things like I was purposely underexposing all my images by about 3 stops, knowing that I would pull them out in RAW later. So I was actually using dynamic range as a tool. Okay. But yeah, the ISOs were insane. But here's the thing. There was noise because, I was up at like some insane, I was up over 3,200, but there was no banding. I had no banding issues. No, I mean the noise, and I will say this, actually, I was able to really do a great job of knocking out most of the noise that was there in Camera Raw. I didn't have to go to a ton of plugins and that kind of stuff. I've talked about this before. I don't have a problem with a little bit of noise, especially when I'm working in ridiculously low light scenarios. I don't know where we crossed that line in photography where we decided that noise was bad or grain was bad. I don't mind a little grain in the picture. I kind of like that. It gives the picture some personality. It gives it some feeling. So I get it. That's not for everybody. Some people want no grain. They want, for everything. But I've had no banding issues. So if you're having banding issues, I would suggest maybe kind of getting that checked out a little bit. So Roderick, that's how they see mirrorless in Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah, it's a good possibility. So Elliot, can you talk a little bit about education over equipment? I find a lot of people which would be better served taking a class than buying more stuff. So you know what? Here's the thing, Elliot. You're going to be surprised at my answer because keep in mind, what do? I teach. I travel the country. I do workshops. I teach people. People can do workshops with me online, real-time video workshops. Most photography workshops today, now you guys make sure you don't quote the first part of the sentence. If you're going to quote me, you got to quote the whole thing. Deal? Okay. Most photography workshops and most photography classes that you can go take as adults today suck horribly. That's the first part. If you quote that part, you're taking everything I said out of context. Let me finish. The reason they suck is because of the people that take the courses and go to the workshops. Because they go with the wrong expectations. Okay? The fact of the matter is, 90% of what you're going to learn one-to-one at a workshop, you could learn on YouTube. You could learn it in a book. You could learn it in a lot of different ways. But the problem of it is, people go to a workshop and they want to be entertained because there's somebody famous teaching the workshop. Oh, that's cool. You get to meet them. You get to see them work. Okay, so I'm going to pay money to watch a guy take pictures. But people do that. If you don't walk out of that workshop and go pick up your camera right away and try the techniques and try the things that you saw done at that workshop, you've just thrown your money away. And that, folks, there's a whole bunch of science behind that about the way that human beings, adults, learn and retain information. So that's why I say that most workshops and classes don't work. So, Elliot, and believe me, I'm just as guilty of this in my career. I give people a hard time about gas, gear acquisition syndrome, right? Who doesn't like toys, right? I like toys. So, we all get gas to some degree. Yes, you have to manage it. I'm not going to lie. I've been very honest about this. One of the greatest things about doing this YouTube channel is I can have gas and I have an excuse, right? Because I'm going to use it in a video. It's the best excuse ever. But the fact of the matter is, what I learned about years ago, and I kind of had to, was when I started as a kid, I didn't have the money to buy anything and everything. Everything I bought for years was used, number one. And I stuck with used equipment for a long time because it allowed me to get more gear. So I had a wider range of tools available. I think the challenge everybody has is you've got to find that balance, and you've got to be honest with yourself. But more importantly, you've got to make sure not to overwhelm yourself. You guys have heard me talk a lot when people ask me about lighting systems. I talk about the idea of figure out which lighting system you want, spec it out on paper, dream big, because you're not going to go buy it all at once, and then buy one light. Buy one light, one stand, and one trigger. And learn how to use that light. Learn how to use that one light until you're so bored with that light because you can pretty much do anything with it. And then what you do is you don't go to the camera store and buy the next light. In fact, you go to the dollar store and you buy a Walmart reflector, except they're not Walmart reflectors anymore. They're dollar store reflectors for $1. And then you use that one light and the reflector. And then when you've mastered that, then you move on to a modifier. Still not a second light. You get a modifier, an umbrella, and so on. So I think really the key with the equipment over education thing is they're both actually equally as important. But people have to realize, number one, more equipment doesn't make you a better photographer, right? It simply doesn't. And number two, the value to having the equipment is only if you actually learn how to use it. So yes, if you're going to be that photographer that has equipment but doesn't know how it works, well, then yeah. But the problem there is, if we're being really fair, Elliot, if you're the photographer that has all the equipment and doesn't really know how to work it, you're also probably the photographer that will go to a workshop to be entertained and not really learn anything. The harsh reality about learning, gang, it's hard. It takes a lot of effort to learn. It just does, right? So, it's one of those things. If you're willing to put in the effort, you can learn. If you're not willing to put in the effort, you're not going to learn. So I don't disagree with you, Elliot. I just think that there's still a balance. I don't think, unfortunately, either option is that easy. It's kind of like a bigger picture, So, Kieran, is it bad that I use a Canon flash on a Nikon body? It actually triggers. Well, I think it breaks some moral clauses somewhere along the way, but no, it's not bad. It will trigger. Obviously, if you're putting the Canon flash on the Nikon body, you're not going to get all the TTL features and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it'll trigger. It'll work totally. So, let's see here. Where are we at? Ajax, lots of iconic photos have grain and noise. They still made history and they look amazing. Ajax, you couldn't be more correct. You are absolutely correct. In fact, lots of those same iconic photos. Folks, don't take my word on this. Go to Google, type in iconic photographs, and then click on the images tab and look at the pictures that come up. And start paying attention to how many of those images suck from a technical standpoint. They're grainy. They're blurry. The composition is horrible. But yet, these are photographs that have stood the test of time. These are photographs that we hold up and say, look at this incredible image. And then take a moment and say, why? That's interesting because yes, look, it's a blurry picture, but yet we say it's an incredible image. And what you'll notice is these iconic photos that come up in the search, they are photos that represent moments that have lots of emotion behind them. So, going back to what you guys hear me talk about all the time, what's more important, the gear, the lighting, or the subject? It's the subject. 80% psychology, 20% photography, Put your effort into the subject and creating the moment, and you're going to win every time. It's not the gear that it's going to get you there. The gear is like a tool. Some people like Craftsman screwdrivers. Other people like Stanley. The two of them will argue and kick and fuss over which is better. But at the end of the day, it's still righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Same deal, right? So who cares? It's about the moment. That's what it comes down to. So, all right. Let's see. Scrolling back here. Where are we at? Still scrolling up, guys. Checking out your stuff here. Okay, let's get back past the whole less stoppers thing. Let's see. TK coefficient, you convinced me to get the Tokina 100. The lens is magic. Yeah, it is. It's a sweet lens, man. Let's see. Adam's statement about Olympus. I know I missed some questions up here along the way. So let me back on up. You guys keep typing questions in. I got a couple more there saved here, but Aaron, could I recommend a budget light stand that will hold an AD200 and a 45 centimeter softbox? No, but I can tell you how to find one. So I'll be honest with you, of all the studio gear that I have, and I'm kind of embarrassed, especially since I'm sponsored by some lighting companies, my light stands are like a mishmash of stuff. I am usually OCD about, like, I like to have all of the same kind of something just because it's easier. You know, I've got like 3 of one kind of stand, 2 of another, 2 of a different one. And it annoys me, but I've just never gotten around to prioritizing and say, you know what? I need to replace all my stands. So here's the thing, the mistake that a lot of people make when they buy stands is they don't realize, Aaron, that stands are rated for a certain weight. So even if you go to like Amazon, you can go to Amazon, type in light stands. So there's 2 things that you need to decide on when you look at those light stands. Number one, how much weight do you need to put on it? So all you got to do is look up the 8200 and it's going to tell you what it weighs. Look up whatever brand 45 centimeter softbox you have, and it's going to tell you how much it weighs. Put that together. That's the weight that you need to be able to put on a stand. Then, when you look at the stands, every light stand is going to tell you designed to support X amount of weight. So it either supports what you have or it doesn't, right? And then the other thing you're going to look at for the stand is how tall do you need it to be? So, you know, let's use a little logic also. If you're going to use a really, really tall stand that's rated for only holding a little bit of equipment, it's probably a fairly flimsy stand, right? But the bottom line is your stand tall enough to get your light as high as you need it to be? And is it designed to support the amount of weight that you have? Put those 2 things together and you'll be good to go. And then it's a matter of, do you like stands with clip locks? Do you like stands with twist knobs? Do you like stands where the legs fold up this way? Or do you like stands where the legs pull out this way? That's completely a matter of personal preference. And I guarantee we could start a debate here that would last for an hour over it's better to have the legs pull out or fold up. Totally personal preference. And a lot of times the arguments in favor of one or the other, it has to do with specific uses, like how somebody actually uses it. So there's no right or wrong there. You're going to go with what your preference is and what you like. You can get stands like, I think it's the Kupo stands that you can actually take 4 or 5 of them. They kind of lock together so they fold, they store very efficiently. And then, of course, if you want the kind of stands that will withstand an earthquake, you're going to go with like C stands. But then you're certainly not going to take those out on location unless you want to lug a ton of weight around or you have an assistant. So bottom line is, when you look at the stand, look at what it's rated for with weight, and then look at its height, and that's what you're going to do, okay? So Adam, he's using a flash in the hot shoe, and he's using a bounce card to add some light. He's noticing on some of his images that he's seeing a bright light in the center of each pupil, and at other times, he's seeing the catch light in the pupil of one eye and the iris of the other. The eye detector, okay, so Adam, I'm guessing you're asking me why is that? My hunch is, so without seeing some of your shots, I'd actually need to see a couple of shots. So Adam, you could post them in the Facebook group as a question. I'm cool with that. But based on what you're saying, my belief is what's happening that in some of the shots, while you may be bouncing, you probably have the bounce or the flash angled down a little bit too far. So the person's eye is actually seeing the front of the flash. So the concept behind bounce flash is that all the light's going up. And I see it all the time. I see it all the time at weddings, like at wedding receptions, wedding photographers. They're doing bounce, but the flash is low enough that if a person's 10 feet away, they've actually got a direct line of sight. So the flash isn't aimed straight at them, but it's aimed at an angle like this where they still have a direct line of sight to the Fresnel head. And the spread on that Fresnel head is still sending direct light right to them. So that direct light, of course, is going to give you a much different catch light than the bounce light going up to the ceiling or hitting your bounce card. So that's what it sounds like, but I have to see some of the images. So, share some of the images, and, I can definitely tell you a little bit more specifically if I see that. Okay. All right. Gang, if you had a question all the way back to the beginning and I missed it, just to play it safe, reload it again here. Okay. I'm going to get some of these later questions here. I've still got a couple more that are saved. But I just scrolled back through and I think I saw most of it, but I have a feeling I probably missed a few. Okay. So, let's see. I got the portrait question lens. Xavier had another question. A friend of his, she's afraid that she's going to miss the shallow depth of field from full frame if she goes to a micro four thirds or an APS-C. So his question is, do I miss the depth of field that I got with the full frame cameras as opposed to what I'm getting with the Olympus and the micro four thirds? Not at all. But to be fair, okay, let me give you a little bit more context to that before you pass that information along to your friend. So this was a set of debates that I used to have with people when I was a Nikon owner. You guys, I've had this debate here on TogChat when I was a Nikon owner. So this is not just to save somebody the trouble of typing in, oh, he's an Olympus shill. No, I'm not. They're not paying me a dime, okay? The bottom line is this. I understand how to use depth of field as a tool. I understand the 4, not 3, ways that I can control depth of field. And I understand how to mix and match and use them to get what I want. I also understand that when I take pictures, the subject is 1,000 times more important than the band background. So I don't get hung up on bokeh and backgrounds. Yeah, I want a clean background. I don't want distractions in my background, etc. But that's an easy problem to solve, right? So especially, you guys know my favorite Olympus lens is the 45mm f1.2, which Olympus has their feathered bokeh, which is just to die for. Obviously, in the studio, there's not a lot of value for that for me. You've seen some shots that I've done where I've purposely shot at 1.2 and draped material over both me, the photographer, and the model so that I could play with the bokeh and got really cool results. But no, I haven't missed the shallow depth of field from full frame at all because it's depth of field is a tool, gang. It's a creative tool. It's probably one of the most important tools that we have available to us as photographers when it comes to the physics of photography. So that's, understand, it's not a gadget that you buy. It's not an accessory that you get. It's basically, it's a tool that's provided to us from physics, and it's a creative tool. So it's really one of the most important things for you to learn and understand and really be able to use it and manipulate it. So many people understand it, but they don't really know how to actually use it. And, I should say, don't know how to use it beyond getting a blurry background. There's so much more to depth of field than that. So, for me, I don't have a problem with it. So, Gary, if you use a submit a question to TogChat link, is that for the next episode or the current one you're live on? It depends. It depends on when I see the question. If I see it now, tonight, I will do my best to answer it tonight. If I don't, I save them. I don't delete them. But it all depends on whether or not I actually see it, in real time. So that would be why. So, okay. Let's see. Xavier, I asked the question because I hear very often that a longer focal length lens would provide a shallow depth of field, not talking about lens compression. Xavier, so to go back to my answer, I from a factual standpoint, your question about, same size subject in the frame, but different focal length lenses at different distances. From a straight up bench test by the numbers, I don't know. I really don't. If I had to guess, my guess would be yes, it's going to be different. That would totally be my guess. But from a practical standpoint, it's not something that I think really has any, at least for me, it doesn't have any implications. And I've done portraits pretty much my whole life. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of value to that piece of information, at least for me. So I wish I could give you more details, but I really don't. So, okay. Derek, had some problems buying more entries for the photo contest on PhotoCrowd. Sent them. You have to pay for entries? Are you serious? Derek, I'm not going to lie to you. I honestly am not aware. So full disclosure, gang, you guys know that Interfit is one of my sponsors. They reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to do this promotion with PhotoCrowd. Would you be willing to judge it? Being, the good guy, I said yes. That was before I found out how much work was involved. I'm not going to lie, guys. Like, I've looked at over 2,000 some images already, and they're flooding in like crazy. And, the requirements of it, I have to do reviews on a bunch and that. And I'm not whining about it, but I'm just saying it's a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Prior to me agreeing to judge this contest, Derek, I've never even heard of PhotoCrowd. And that's as far as I'm going to go. I mean, it's been interesting. Looking at some of the entries, there are photographs that have been entered in the contest that I'm judging that range everywhere from pictures taken with iPhones to pictures taken with Snapchat on an iPhone, to GoPro pictures, to really beautiful pictures. So it's all across the board. JR's telling me the first entry is free if you want to add more than it costs. Wow. Derek, I'm sorry. I really don't know, but I will tell you this, and it's not going to help you for this one because I won't be back here until next Wednesday. So I'm sorry. I will look into it and I will do my best to report back to you guys next week. But yeah, I would try and hit up their customer service people. But unfortunately, I have no actual affiliation with PhotoCrowd. I've just been asked to judge this contest for Interfit. And so, for that purpose, and I guess part of the thing that's interesting is, the theme is my escape. So you can probably imagine the overwhelming majority of the photographs do not have people in them. And so since I'm a people photographer, it's kind of an interesting fit because I've been looking at a lot of landscape pictures. So, but it's been fun. It's interesting. So, all right. Let's see. Curtis, just wondering, do you have a favorite vintage lens, and are there any you would recommend? No, man. Probably my favorite vintage lens is one that I never use. It's that one on the Hahnemann Praktika up there. I'm not a gear junkie, so I don't mean that like in a negative way. My favorite gear is the gear that I'm using right now. Always has been. So yeah, I don't. The only reason I have that camera, it literally was one of those stupid sentimental moments where I bought it on eBay because that's not the actual first camera, but it was that model with that lens. But no, that's not my actual one. This one, the shutter doesn't work, and it's a paperweight, literally. I got it for like $20. So, Jeremy, who was the last photographer that inspired a shoot from you? You've long admired Avedon's work and wanted to do some black and whites inspired by his stuff. Didn't get there yet. Two photographers, but this goes back a ways because at this point, not to sound arrogant or cocky, that is not where this answer is coming from. I don't pay a lot of attention to other photographers at this point. But I would say actually there's three photographers that come to mind that inspired me enough to go out and try and do what they were doing at the time. One, Bert Stern, specifically Marilyn Monroe, The Last Sitting, probably one of my most favorite set of images ever. All black and white, a lot of grain, backlit from the windows in the Beverly Hills Hilton. Just amazing images, plus the emotion and the feeling of Marilyn Monroe in the pictures, the rawness, the connection she had with the camera. Just love them. Number two, the all-time master of color in my mind, gentleman by the name of Peter Turner. This man did things with Kodachrome transparency film and got color from Kodachrome transparency film that was just not humanly possible. He was a big influence on so much of what you see me do with color. Third would be Francesco Scavullo. I believe it was 17 years, so don't hate me if I got the number wrong. Check it up. I believe it was 17 years. He was the only photographer to shoot the covers for Cosmopolitan magazine during that time period. So he had a run, like a crazy long run. Loved his style. His style of fashion photography was very colorful, bold colors, even though he did some amazing black and white. Very bold colors, very bright, but very, very animated. Not only the idea of women jumping and things flying around, but the personality and that type of stuff. So those would be the three that come to mind for me that were great. And then actually, there's a fourth. I can't leave this guy out because this is a guy I'm friends with him on Facebook today. Not that I like talk to him all the time, but it's just, for me, this is me geeking out, right? It's just really cool to be his friend on Facebook. But I follow him, and he's still a working, active photographer. Photographically, he is the most historically relevant photographer in our generation. And he's still alive, and he's still historically relevant. And that is Mr. David Kennerly, who was the Pulitzer Prize winner for his photographs of Vietnam when he was 23 years old. He was the White House press photographer for President Gerald Ford. He was the first White House photographer to have unfettered access to the Oval Office. He's photographed every president since Kennedy. I'm pretty sure since Kennedy, or whomever came right after Kennedy. But the guy is just amazing. In fact, the picture that you see on CNN all the time, the portrait of Donald Trump that you see whenever the big logo comes up for Donald Trump, that's a David Kennerly shot. A huge, fan of his. So, let's see here. Okay, so scrolling back up. Where are we at here? Jeremy, that was your question. Xavier, would I ever want to try a medium format camera? Nah. I don't need to try it. I mean, I used medium format in the film days. I just don't need that many pixels. I have no need for it. I mean, obviously, if that was important to me, I wouldn't have left, the Nikon D810 and gone to Micro Four Thirds. It's just much more camera than I have a need for. Truthfully, it's much more camera than most people have a need for. So for the folks that are kind of, into the toys and that, cool, but crazy amount of money, and for me, just no value. So, let's see. DK Coefficient, if you want to see some comedy, check out JP Morgan. So DK, really? So you come to my channel and you're going to go advertise another YouTube channel? Thanks, man. What good is that, right? Yeah, out of here. Done. I don't need that crap. So let's see. Kieran, what should I do for photo storage? Because I've almost filled my 2 terabyte hard drive. Should I stick with the 2 terabyte drives or get a bigger desktop hard drive system? Well, two things, Kieran, but obviously I know folks, Kieran's a teenager. So again, money, limited. Definitely go with bigger drives. So right now so what I do is I generally buy one generation beyond the newest, because one generation beyond the newest, the price drops dramatically, right? Now, given that you're a teenager with limited funds, you might want to go 2 or 3 generations beyond the newest because the price is going to drop even more yet. But I'm currently using 12 terabyte drives. And then, of course, I back up offsite. But yeah, I would definitely try to maybe go with a bigger system. And then what you do is you work your drive, you kind of work your drives down and work them out as they get really old and that kind of stuff. We're still a couple years away from solid state drives being super, super affordable. They're much more affordable now, but we're still a couple years away from them being really, really, affordable. So at this point, yeah, you want to kind of keep working your way up in terms of total storage, and then working the older ones kind of out the door. So, okay. Leanne, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support. So, let's see. Captain Comedy, maybe when you start doing fashion photos or picky landscapes, you can move back to medium. Yeah, I doubt it. And again, it's a matter of kind of where you get. I have nothing against the people that use it. I mean, if it's your thing, it's your thing. But literally, like, my story about leaving Nikon was no BS. The whole point was I just tired of dealing with big ass heavy cameras. I mean, I wasn't gaining anything with all those pixels. I wasn't gaining anything with all that dynamic range. I defy anyone to tell me that the quality of my images dropped off when I went to Olympus, because it hasn't at all. In fact, I would actually argue it's been better. And I've got a video coming up. I promise you guys, I'm going to do a video of my 6-month review. One of the reasons why it's improved, one, because I'm shooting more, I'm having a ton more fun. 2, it's actually made my post-processing so much easier. Like, I almost felt stupid when I realized how much time I was just wasting away because of retouching the full frame stuff. Because I was retouching so many more pixels than I needed to be dealing with. So, it's been better for me, all the way around. So I certainly don't see myself going away. And Captain Comedy, what I would do, let's to keep it in perspective of the problem solving, right? because I've had similar things happen. If I had a client come to me and say, I want to hire you to do this job, but it's got to be a 50 megapixel file, right? Or a 100 megapixel file, whatever. Then I would simply say, sure, I can do that. And part of what they would be paying me, and believe me, it would be a line item. So I would not be absorbing the cost. They would. I would rent the camera to do it. Back in like 2004 or 2005, when we were well into the digital realm, I had a trade publication from Chicago contact me about shooting a magazine cover and some interior shots for a trade publication at a Rite Aid drugstore that was in my area. Sounded like a really cool job, actually, what they wanted, the way they wanted to lay it out. They went through the whole thing. And then when she gets to the end of the specs, as she's going over, the whole detail on the phone, and she's like, but we need it on medium format film. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, number one, I was not a medium format shooter. Number two, I didn't own a film camera. Number three, at that point, I hadn't shot color transparency film in easily 5 or 6 years. But the job was a really good paying gig. She had already told me the budget that they had available, which was high for what I would have actually bid the job. So I wanted the job. So literally what I did is I said to her, I said, well, you know what? I don't shoot film anymore. I've transitioned, but I can shoot film if you want. I'm going to need an assistant and I'm going to have to rent a camera. She's like, fine. So true story. What I did, I went to a friend who was still actively working professionally and exclusively shooting film. He had not transitioned yet into digital. I hired him and his camera. So I paid him the rental fee for the gear, hired him as my assistant for the day. He came along. His entire task was basically set the exposure for my shot and hand me the camera with the proper exposure dialed in. Because my concern was, at that point, it had been so long since I had exposed film, I didn't trust myself to make sure that I was going to nail the exposure on the transparency film. Because transparency film, you got to get it right, especially when it's going to go right from that transparency to a printed page. So that was his task. And that was a line item in the invoice to the client. So they paid, basically, he came. I think he helped me carry a bag or two, but I mean, that was it. But the entire purpose I wanted him there was basically to make sure that he was going to meter my scene, set that exposure up so that I could pick up that camera and have the confidence of knowing that what I was shooting was going to be properly exposed, done, and not have to worry about it. So that's exactly what I would do if somebody came to me and said, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of money, but you've got to shoot it on a Hasselblad or whatever. Sure, just go rent one. But there's no need to own one, in that sense. So, Captain Comedy, you've been watching hours of my stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, man. So you're starting out in Pennsylvania, Delaware photo biz. How much time do you think should be spent on worrying about getting the biz side right versus shooting? Let me say this. There's not a number I can give you, Captain Comedy. And by the way, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to make it a sport now to see how many times I can say Captain Comedy. It sounds like Captain Obvious here. For me, I don't think there's a number that I can give you about like how many hours you should be. But I will say this. Beware. One of the big mistakes people make is they decide they want to get into business long before they really know what they're doing with a camera. Okay. And that's a big mistake. So since you're just getting into me, I'll repeat this story one more time. I tell it a lot. It is my belief that professional photographers, me included, are idiots. The reason we are idiots is because I have yet to meet the person in my entire career who purchased their very first camera for the purpose of making money. Nobody does that. We buy cameras because we think it'd be cool to take good pictures. And then we kind of decide we're having fun with it and we get hooked. And it's like, wow, like I want to do more of this. But then the professional photographer gets stupid. And it happens in one of two ways. I've never heard of another variation. It's one of two ways. Version one, they get this brilliant idea that if they start making some money with the camera, they could buy more gear. So there's a lot of logic to that. It's still stupid, trust me. But there's logic to that one. The other one, the really dumb one, is they decide, if I start charging for this, I can make money and I could pay my bills with it and quit my job. That's the really dumb one. And here's why it's dumb. The minute you decide to go into business and become a professional photographer, the rules change. You're no longer shooting for you. You're shooting for somebody else. So you have to make them happy. You have to do what they want. And you better be damn good at it, because otherwise you don't get good word of mouth and you don't get new customers. So the biggest mistake that people make is they jump into the business side before they're really ready, before they really know their cameras, before they really understand depth of field, before they really understand the inverse square law, before they really understand how to solve problems, right? I mean, that's what photography is. So, you know, my advice to you is it's not about how many hours, because there are no rules, but it is about really making sure you're able to deliver a quality product and you really know what the hell you're doing. And here's the benchmark that I give people a lot. I talk about this a lot, so I know I sound like a broken record, but most of you that are listening to me drive a car. When you get in your car, you turn the key or you push the button, but what you don't do is you don't think to yourself for a moment, how do I drive this car? Because you've practiced. You had to pass a test, but you practiced. And you drive and you drive and you drive. And it's second nature. When you're in the car, you think about your directions, you think about the oncoming traffic, but you do not think about how to operate the car. But yet so many photographers, even photographers making money, charging people for their services, routinely have to think, how do I do this? How do I make this work? That's problematic. And it's actually rude. It's unfair to the client. So you really just have to be honest, because there's not one like set answer that like this is it. Okay. Life's beautiful. It is. Forgive me for what may be a silly question. There are no dumb questions unless it's, you know, about Sony. Just kidding. So, but how do you know if a photo is tack sharp, and why is it that what looks sharp for me, for instance, may look soft to someone else? Ooh, okay, so there's a lot of layers to that. Life's beautiful. But one of the first things is I'm going to take a guess here. You can tell me if I'm even close. I'm guessing that maybe part of what you're referencing might be the idea that you had a picture on your computer screen and you know it's sharp. At least you think it looks sharp. It looks really, really good. And then you post it up on Facebook and some idiot in some Facebook group looks at it and says, it's not sharp. If that's the case, don't stress. Because number one, Facebook compresses the bejesus out of your files. And remember, a JPEG is compressed in the first place and then it could get recompressed. That usually doesn't end well. Now, there are ways that you can get past that, right? And ways that you can still make your images look sharp. You know, for me, an image is tack sharp. It kind of screams tack sharp. I mean, like the lines are crisp. It look like they're cut with a razor. You know, they're there. I find more often than not when people are running into the question that you're asking, so that's why I'm making some assumptions until you tell me otherwise, that really where the disconnect is their images are sharp, but there's a problem in the way they're finishing their images for output where they're losing that sharpness. And honestly, something as simple as reducing the size of the image will remove some of the sharpness. That's why generally before you print a file or before you save a file out to the web, you want to add a little sharpening to it. And it's going to be a different amount of sharpening for printing than it is for going to the web. But by reducing in size, just that alone, you're going to reduce some of the sharpness in the image. So you've got to resharpen it a little bit. So it kind of sounds that's what you're dealing with. So Captain Comedy, I really appreciate the kind words and the support. Thank you. So I do hope that you get to see me at one of the speaking engagements. In fact, for those of you that may not have that information, if you go to my website, here, I'll get you the link. Let me switch over. On my website, up at the top there, lectures and workshops. All you got to do is click on that link, and eventually, let's try it again. There we go. Here it comes. Click on that link, and it will load my workshop, teaching schedule, lectures. My next stuff coming up, I'm going to be out of Chicago. A lot of cool stuff planned there. Then I've got a couple talks coming in New York, up in Valhalla, and then also in the Bronx. And then let's see, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is not far from me, the Horizon Photography Summit. That's coming up. A bunch of stuff. So that gets added to, routinely. But here is the link for all of you guys. So Russell King, last time you'll post this, you don't want to be a pain. I won't say it. I'm kidding. So for portrait photography, are lighting ratios important, or is it better to light the face evenly, meaning no shadows, mainly indoor portraits? Oh, Russell, it's a good thing you're asking this here, because if you were to come to one of my workshops and ask me about lighting ratios, I would yell at you and rant. I won't rant tonight. I'm not in the mood to rant. Who gives a damn about lighting ratios? Seriously, who cares? That's my take on a lighting ratio. So hopefully that answers your question. Lighting ratios are what you read in books that are written by people that suck, but want to make you think that they're really good. So they tell you, oh, you have to have a 2-to-1 ratio or a 3-to-1 ratio, or you got to have a triangle over here. It's like, seriously? Nah, don't worry about that stuff. I tend to light what most people refer to as very commercially, meaning you don't see a lot of shadows, right? But that's my thing. That doesn't mean that shadows are bad, but there is such a thing as a bad shadow. There are shadows that are not flattering. There are shadows that just yuck, okay? Good shadows are great because they bring mood. They bring drama to a picture. They can bring depth to a picture. So, bottom line, I wouldn't worry about the ratio as much. And besides, to me, the example I always give, people talk about 2-to-1 lighting ratios or they talk about Rembrandt lighting. I can't tell you how many pictures I've seen that were done with Rembrandt lighting and they've got the person looking in the wrong damn direction and there's no triangle. So what good was the Rembrandt lighting? Just because they had a 2-to-1 lighting ratio set up, they didn't understand what the Rembrandt lighting was because they had the person looking the wrong way. So, right? And needless to say, not only was the person looking the wrong way, so they didn't really have Rembrandt lighting, but the person in the picture also looked really stiff and uncomfortable. It's all about the connection and that kind of stuff. Russell, shadows are mainly what you mean. Yeah, shadows are strictly a personal choice, man. It depends on what you're after. Keep in mind that lighting, so the way you should be thinking about this, and this is deep, right? This is going to sound kind of artsy fartsy, so I'm sorry, but it is what it is, right? Lighting is a character in your image. It's part of the subject. So you've got the person, right? But then you've got the light. So now the challenge is you see some people in their pictures and it's like there's two different subjects. Because you look at the picture and you immediately see this crazy light. Well, that means it's taking away from the subject. So the challenge is to use a light as a tool. That word's coming up a lot tonight, right? To help create the mood, to help set the tone. You can use light to help draw attention to where you want it. Certainly smooth, even lighting, you're really just keeping the light even and you're letting your subject and whatever you put in front of the camera kind of do all the work. That's not bad. That's what I tend to do a lot of. With shadows and with dramatic lighting, you can use those to control what somebody sees when they look at your picture because obviously they can't see what's in shadow. They can see what's lit. So I would encourage you, don't get yourself caught up with the idea of one's better than the other. It is a combination of several things. One, personal taste. Two, I don't believe that there is one version that's good for everything. So like with me, overwhelmingly, I tend to use soft, even light, very few shadows. But flip side of that, I have plenty of pictures with lots of shadows. So, it's kind of not an all or nothing kind of answer. So that's how I would, go that. Brad Pryor, let's try and get one or two more in here. We'll see if we can actually finish under 90 minutes tonight. How's that? So you use a Nikon D750, my sympathies. Just kidding. With an 85mm f2.8, a 24-70 f2.8, and the kit lens 24-120 f4. I'm thinking of getting rid of the kit lens and switching to a 100 or 135 prime. Would the switch be good? I shoot portraits. So you got an 85. The real question, Brad, is why don't you like the 85 for portraits? What is the 85 not doing for you that you feel a 100 or a 135 would do for you? That's the real question, okay? So honestly, your question's got a little hint of gas in it, okay? Just a little, but it does. The 24-120 f4, I would be careful about getting rid of that lens. And the only reason I say that is, you have any vacations planned? You gonna do any traveling? Like you go on a vacation with a full frame camera, a 24-120, man, that's a sweet lens to be carried. So it's f4, big deal. The Nikon D750, you can pump the ISO up that extra stop to make up for the f4. Okay, so I would say to you, the only way you really get a good answer to that question is you got to give me a reason why you think you need the 100 or 135. But honestly, it just sounds like you're kind of getting a little antsy on the gear side, right? And that's cool. We've all been there, but you're not giving me a reason why you need to change, which means I can't really give you an answer as to whether or not it would be good, right? You can shoot amazing portraits with an 85mm. 85mm is nothing to shake a stick at. So, okay. Leanne Fulton, how did you decide what to specialize in? I feel like I'm all over the place and shoot everything. And Leanne, the best advice I can give you is keep shooting everything. Literally, when you get to the point where you realize you're shooting mostly this, you're there. Game over. Do your thing. That's it. I never decided to shoot people. Shooting people was what got me into photography. like I've told the story before, so I won't go through the whole story tonight, but everything I've ever done has been about people. That's what fascinates me. The camera provided me access. I know you guys will find it hard to believe, but I was a shy kid. I'm still the kind of person I'd actually rather cross the street than have to encounter somebody. But put a camera around my neck, and even in this case, in theory, I have a camera around my neck. I'm talking about photography, right? Give me a camera, I can talk to anybody. Give me a camera, I can go anywhere. No problem. So when I was a kid, I learned that the camera gave me access. It gave me access to people that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. Even like my last video, working with this magician, Matthew Furman. I mean, you talk about random meetings. I encountered this guy via YouTube. He reached out to me with some questions, and I did some consulting for him to help him with his YouTube setup. And, the more we got talking, it's like, dude, you got to come down and do a shoot. Like, let's do this. Because he showed me the pictures on his website. And you guys know I don't pull any punches. I told him, like, dude, those pictures are flat. They're not helping you. So let's do some new ones. And we'll make a YouTube video out of it. Boom. And so, I got to spend time with this guy and his girlfriend, and you got to see his magic. Like, how cool is that? Like, so for me, that's how I decided what it was. But it wasn't kind of a matter of like, oh, I like this song. This is what I'm going to do in business. It's got to find you. So especially then, if you're just kind of really getting started and you're trying to, get things going, just keep doing what you're doing. And eventually you're going to realize that you tend to keep going to one thing more so than the other things. And that's going to give you your answer. Okay. Elliot, is there such a thing as low light diffractions? I've seen a lot of images where the ISO needed to be bumped up and the image had a graininess and the edges were fringed. I don't know about low light diffractions, but there, depending on the camera brand and depending on the ISO you're going to shoot at, Elliot, you'll get all kinds of crazy things going on with the noise. Bottom line is cameras need light. And so, if we're going to push things to the extremes, then yeah, we have to deal with the fallout of, pushing the cameras beyond their capabilities. Remember, gang, your camera sensors only actually have one ISO. That's the base ISO. All the other ISOs are software interpolations, okay? That's Ajax Rodriguez. That's a hot trick. That's Matthew's thing. You're right. Okay. So all those other ISO settings are software interpolations. So indeed, as we've seen, as software gets better, as the processors and the cameras get bigger and more powerful, we're able to do more with less light and do it with better quality. But it's still, we still have a point where we get noise. So Xavier, light modifier series, it's coming. It'll be like late June, which I said from the beginning. I said in the very first time I talked about it, I said mid to late June. In fact, next week is the week where I'm doing a lot more shooting for it. I've got part of it in the can already, but it's coming. 48 light modifiers. That's what we're working with. So we're doing a comparison starting with speed lights on up through strobes. 48 different modifiers. And I'll forewarn you guys now, it's going to frustrate the heck out of you because I'm not going to tell you which is best. What I'm going to prove to you is that they're pretty much all the same damn thing. That's what I'm going to prove to you. Okay. So ultimately the equipment companies will not be happy with me. But yeah, so there will be a lot of references to the inverse square law. Okay. Ed Francis, in terms of motivation, when you started out, what made you keep pushing, keep improving? Did you look at others' work? Did that help, or did it make you feel like you had a mountain to climb? I was never one that I looked at other people's work. I've got a little bit of a competitive streak in me by nature. I was never one that looked at somebody else's work and found that demoralizing. You'll hear me say it a lot now. So she may even be here. She's sometimes Irene Rudnick watches, my chats, or even Manny Ortiz is here sometimes. So I've said this to both, to both of them and about both of them. It's like, I hate them a little bit because they're so damn talented. So, it's a compliment. It's a backhanded compliment. Right. But I don't, that kind of thing has never demoralized me. For me, the competitiveness part, it's really with myself. It's wanting to be better and wanting to be able to do better than what I did yesterday, because otherwise it's boring. I think what, kind of made me keep pushing and getting better is just myself. It's trying to outdo myself and better myself. Really, that was kind of the biggest thing for me. So, Alan, just found my channel. Awesome, man. I don't know where the hell you've been, but I'm glad you're here now. So thank you. You got a lot of catching up to do. It's like 280 some videos, man. So get to work. All right. Sebastian, do I have any preferred methods to advertise online? What works better and why? Wow. So Sebastian, I'll tell you what, two things. One, I do need to sign off in a minute. Okay. I do not want to go over 90 minutes. So I'm not going to answer that question tonight, but here's the thing. That question is way too broad, right? Because advertise what? What works better for what? So you got to give me some background. So don't type it now. Save you the trouble. Don't type it now. But do me a favor, okay? If you submit it, look in the description below the video. There's a link to submit a question. Take a few minutes, get your thoughts together, but you got to give me some background. What kind of advertising you're trying to do? What kind of work are you trying to get? Maybe what are you doing now? You give me detail. The more detail you give me, even including like a link to your website, the more that I can help you, okay? You give me that next week. Make sure you're here for TogChat, and I'll answer your question, and I'll give you really, really good feedback. In fact, the question that I am going to finish here with here, gang, bear with me 1 second. I got to bring this up. So there's always one thing that I forget when I set up my TogChats, like guaranteed every time, okay? So I had a guy ask me a question in my group tonight, and I asked him for more information. He gave it to me, and I darn near almost forgot to give him the answer. So last question of the night. If you have any other questions, please, again, look at the link underneath the video. Use that link, type in the question. I guarantee you I will answer the question next week. So this gentleman in my group, Derek, asked a question. He's fairly new to the group, but he is struggling getting his past clients to return and also to get new clients to call him. So he's looking for some suggestions to get more work for portrait sessions or maybe using Facebook ads or what it is. So this Monday, he sent out a bunch of messages to previous clients that he's had. And the message was basically offering them a 1-hour portrait session for $100 for the first 10 people that booked a session with him. And he only had one person respond. That was it. So Derek, I'm going to give you some more feedback in the group. So for those of you that are not a member of my Facebook group, by the way, I'm going to provide Derek a lot more background. But here's the thing that I want to kind of touch on. All right. Actually, Troy Hall just said, join us for Patreon on Friday. That is another way to do it. Yes. The link for my Patreon group, guys, is in the description. And I'll also give you that link right here so you have it. But Derek, the short answer for what you're doing is, the big mistake that you just made is you told people what the real value of your work is. By dropping things down to $100, in other words, running a special. Never run specials with discounted prices, gang, ever. When you create a discount, and I'll give you the best examples, especially if you guys are married and you're in the US, you'll totally understand this. And if you're not in the US, you'll still understand the story, but if you're in the US, you'll be able to relate. If you're married and you have a wife that shops at Kohl's. So my wife loves to shop at Kohl's, right? But my wife will not shop at Kohl's unless she has a 30% off discount coupon. My wife will go shop at Kohl's with a 30% off discount coupon, even if she doesn't need to buy a damn thing. She's going to go there because it's 30% off. She'll wait 6 months from one visit to Kohl's to the next if she doesn't have a 30% off discount coupon, because she knows that that's the real price at Kohl's, 30% off. So why in the world would she ever consider spending more than that? So when you discount your prices, you have told people the real value of your work, and you're never going to get them to spend the real money again. The other problem, so if you want to do specials, you give them an extra thing, because let's face it, 8x10 prints cost you less than $3 at a good lab. You better be selling that 8x10 print for $50 to $100. That's a heck of a markup. So if the value for that 8x10 print is $50, if you want to give somebody a discount, give them your regular session price, but tell them you'll throw in 2 8x10s. You're going to give them $100 worth of free prints, but you're not discounting the value of your shoot, ever. The other problem that you have, Derek, is just by kind of randomly sending out the messages and saying, hey, first 10 people. So you're basically saying, you've only got a couple hours or a couple days to get this offer. You're pressuring people. Most people don't get their pictures done professionally, spontaneously. The only time you get pictures done professionally, spontaneously, were back in the 1980s when they had those places in the shopping malls called glamour shots, or when you're at like the amusement parks and they have those places where you can put on all the Western costumes and you get your, that's spontaneous, right? But a good portrait session, a good professional portrait session, you don't get that done spontaneously. That's something that people build up to. So the messages that you want to be sending out to people are kind of like just reminders. Give them suggestions, ideas of why they may want to consider having a new updated portrait done. You know, it's been 2 years since you had a portrait done. I'm sure your kids are doing great, but I bet your kids look a lot different now. They've probably grown up. Give them reasons. not everybody thinks about that idea of like, oh yeah, it's been a long time since we did a good portrait. We should, get something more going. So, Derek, you're in Topeka, Kansas. Even worse, man. Sorry, you're in the Midwest. So, I mean, it's a tough sell, right? I mean, Midwest tends to be a little bit more blue collar, which is not bad, but you've got to give people more of a reason why. So part of your notes that you keep on these clients should be things that you know about them, things about their family, things about their kids. Give them a reason, give them incentive, make sure that you're kind of tweaking that thought process and getting that thought process started, but don't give them the, hey, like when it hits 10, it's over. Because you're not Groupon, right? We're not, we're not doing like an auction sale where like 10 people only, time's up. Like photography just doesn't really work well that way. Make it much more personal. Definitely no pressure. I actually liked Derek. When I saw your first post, I thought that you were going to tell me you ran a bunch of Facebook ads, and I was like, oh, he wasted a lot of money. And then when I found out that you actually sent messages to these people, I was like, that's great. I think that's awesome. Okay. It's a good use of social media. Make sure it's very personal though, but personalize just beyond your canned message, so to speak. Personalize it to try and suggest to them why it might be of value to them to think about a new portrait sitting, and let them know that you hope they'll consider you when they tend to do it. So instead of looking at it as trying to generate a quick burst of business with just 10 people, you should actually be looking at it as an ongoing thing. So let's hope that over the last couple of years, maybe you've had 50 customers or 60 customers. So over a period of time, you should be reconnecting with all 60 of those customers and just checking in and say, hey, I hope you're doing well, because your customers are your friends. They should be, right? Your customers are people that you care about. If you're providing good service, you're connecting, you're building relationships with your customers. So you want to keep it in ongoing relationships. And the reality of it is just like learning takes a lot of hard work, man, relationships are even harder. If you've ever been in one, right? So, but that's what it is when you're doing the kind of business we do. It's building relationships. So, Derek, I'll be doing a live check-in tomorrow night in the Facebook group. It'll be little bit later than normal, but I'll be doing a live check-in. I'll talk more about your question, but I wanted to get this part in on TogChat. So, listen, gang, I blew it. I'm at 91 minutes, man. 91 minutes for an hour show. That's not bad, right? It's not bad, okay? Not good either. But anyway, so listen, you guys know the drill. If you were here for 91 minutes, you owe me like 182 minutes of camera time. Camera in your hands, shooting. And you actually owe me more than that, because you need to go watch my last video, right? The video about the magician. Go check it out. It's actually, it's this way. There we go. It's not like it's like a super exciting set of pictures, okay? But it's a really, really good detailed breakdown about the shoot, how it was done, everything involved. So I really do encourage you guys to go check it out, because it's definitely one of those here's the thought process piece. All right. So by the time you watch that and these 90 minutes, you owe me double that with camera time before you come back to another TogChat. So get to work, because I hope to see you guys here next week. So you guys know the drill. Thank you so much for being here, spending your Wednesday evening with me. I really, really appreciate it. I hope to see you in my Facebook group. I hope to see you in my Patreon. Remember, if you liked that blue picture that I showed you in the beginning, make sure you follow me on Instagram, because tomorrow I'll post the video that shows you how I did it. And remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go and pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.